right, babes, it's Bimini, and we are back with a brand new episode of The Pieces. And this is going to be a very important conversation because we have the incredible Michaela Loach in today, who is a climate justice activist, writer, and public speaker known for her advocacy for environmental issues and focusing on the intersections of climate, race, and colonization. I feel like we need to be doing more with climate action. I think a lot of the conversation in the media around climate action is deliberately negative towards people that stand up. So Michaela is a very inspiring person, and I'm very excited to get into this conversation, and I hope you love it. Michaela Loach, how's it going, babe?
I'm very excited to be here.
I just want the listeners to know that Michaela is an absolute babe because this morning there was a disruption on the Victoria line, and I was at Barry's class trying to be fit and healthy this morning because I decided to sign up to Hell Week, and for 2.5 hours I got in between, sat on the line, suspended, had to get home and back, so Michaela pushed it back half an hour, so we've got the episode done for you all right?
I was happy to.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that. I just want to first talk about the look.
Thank you. I mean, it's £10 from Vinted.
We love.
I think I end up buying the clothes that like a mum has found in the attic that their kid had ages ago, and I love them because I love the pink.
Yeah, I mean, pink's like my favourite colour. I love that. There's so many different tones, but this is amazing. Yeah, it feels like just happy.
Yeah, I love that. Like even in St Pancras today, one of the people working there was just like, you just made me feel really happy today. You look very bright and colourful, and I love how like old people down the street will also smile, or like kids will look at me like I'm not a real person.
Yeah.
Which, because I think that sometimes we think that when we get older, we have to become more serious and only wear dark colours, and especially in some of the work that I do, like you have to make yourself respectable, professional in that way. But I think bringing a bit of joy in there is so important.
It's so important. I feel like also like, that whole thing of like the professional side, it's like, I understand. Do I understand? I don't know. I feel like wear what the fuck you want, you know?
Yeah, no. And also I think it brings new people to different conversations. Like I was talking to a journalist the other day for an interview, and they were saying that how they first came across my work years ago was because they saw a picture of me in a pink outfit they liked, and they started following me, and then from there they learned about climate justice and anti-capitalism and all this other stuff that maybe they wouldn't have been drawn to otherwise. So I think it can also be like a Trojan horse.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This is going to be a very exciting episode, everyone, by the way, because you know I have opinions, and anti-capitalism, let's go. But Vinted, I like Vinted is great, and I feel like I remember back in like when I was about 15, 16, I started expressing with clothes, finding like my identity, because I think identity and clothes come hand in hand for sure. Yeah. And I was back in my hometown. We were going in charity shops, and I realised you could buy clothes for like £2 at the time, like fur coats, and like they were moth-eaten. And I'd like walk around and be like, "We're so fab," but it was like expressing identity, and like I loved buying it from a charity shop, and back then people were like, ew, really snobby about it. But I feel like it's so important to have a sustainability of it.
100%. I think I think that when you buy things secondhand, often you can be more creative with it, and you also feel more, it forced me to find my own unique sense of style rather than just following whatever Topshop was coming out with.
Yeah.
You know, which was, as a teenager, very much what I think a lot of us were doing.
Well, definitely, yeah.
But it also, I do sometimes worry, like I was with a friend on the weekend, and I think we were in a charity shop, or we went in like a old furniture store. You know, one of those ones that has like a million bits of everything.
Yeah.
And it also had like a vintage section, which within it, like half of it was from Shein. So we were like, well, it's probably still being used again, but we were just kind of worried about how much stuff there is in the world and how there is already enough clothes to clothe everyone, but we're still kind of feeling this need to churn out more things. And actually, I think if we just use what already is there, it's more exciting because we find out like who we are a bit more, but also
I agree
the planet. Yeah,
I agree massively with that. I think like there's so much, including stuff like leather production. I'm here for reusing all of the leather that's there, but stop leather production. We don't need it anymore.
No, exactly.
Stop killing the cows.
Yeah, 100%.
For their hide. You know?
I'm also a vegan.
Yeah, and I think like leather. There's so much there. Like leather is, I think vintage leather and things. It's a weird topic. It's a difficult topic, I think, especially for vegans. But I do think there's so much already here on the planet. That we don't need it anymore. We don't need to make 100%.
I think sometimes people think that to make climate friendly or ethical things, you have to make something new or like find this new technology that like can create leather from pineapples, which is great in some ways, but also how can we just repurpose what already exists and like find new ways with it? And I think, I mean, from obviously I'm not a drag queen myself, but I think in drag people do this a lot, like especially when I see that when queens are starting out, they're trying to just work with what they can get and how can they make a look from that and how can they make something like wonderful and exciting from things that maybe seemed a bit more mundane at the start. And I think that's so exciting.
Yeah, I used to love that side of it. Like back before kind of Drag Race, I'd go in a charity shop, find a dress, do something weird with it, find some like curtain tassels, put the curtain tassels on, find a lampshade, put it on my head, go sing with Pink. Like it was so much fun.
Yeah.
And that's a way to like express and like find yourself through clothes, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think about the greenwashing of sustainability in fashion?
I think it's very frustrating because I think it confuses people, and I can understand why it confuses people. Because sometimes when I talk about the issue with the fashion industry, whether it's like workers' rights or the planet or whatever, sometimes people are like, okay, well, tell me what brand I can buy from. And the lesson from those things isn't to like just find another brand. Often it's like, actually, let's just interrogate how the world works. Like, why is it that we have a world in which most of the clothes that are being produced by people who aren't being paid like a fair living wage, and the fact that the Rana Plaza factory collapsed and many garment workers died, and factory fires and things like that. So and that's the disasters, but also the kind of industry as itself already is based on exploitation. And so I think the question isn't like, okay, how do we just replace this and how do we just paint it green or make it look better? It's actually about how do we create a system which actually honours everyone. And so I think that often this greenwashing kind of gets in the way of that because people are almost getting to that conclusion of, okay, the like system as a whole has a problem. We need to change it completely. They're about to get there and instead they're like, oh no, I'm going to buy this like green thing or this sustainable thing. And I think I find it frustrating because I think it kind of gets in the way of that like political education around it, of understanding it.
It lacks authenticity, and I think a lot of brands just try to do the least. Do the least.
Yeah, and also it's like the fashion industry and the fossil fuel industry are kind of similar in some ways because the majority of what's being produced is very harmful and damaging to the world. But from what we see and from their advertising campaigns, we think that they are just like eco-friendly, amazing companies that only care about people in the world. Like fossil fuel companies invest like less than 5% of their money into renewables, but all of their advertising campaigns are just renewables. And like the fashion industry, I don't actually know the statistics, but I'm sure that their investment in sustainables or into things like just reducing the volume of clothes they make, which would be the thing that would have a bigger impact on the planet than just making these kind of green replacements. They're not investing in that, but instead they're just making out as if they are changing everything and everything's recycled, even if you look at it, actually like maybe 10% of the garment is recycled. So I think it just confuses people and it's not fair. And there needs to be, I think, more regulation around what companies are allowed to say in their marketing.
But I feel like the governments don't care enough. Like it's something that I think like the whole economy around it, the system it's a change that has to happen deep rooted within.
Sure. I mean, that's because of like capitalism, because like our economic system in the UK and many other countries around the world and kind of the global economic system at the moment, it requires the economy to like grow by 3% every year. Otherwise it collapses. Otherwise the economy collapses, which means we have to be made to believe we have to buy more shit that we don't need in order for this growth to be possible. And so the economy has to double every 20 years. And that's just necessary in the system. And often a lot of us don't question it, this like kind of thing that's framed as capitalist realism by Mark Fisher, this idea that capitalism is the only way and there's no alternative and this is how it is. And so we have to just buy more stuff. And the issue isn't like the amount of things that are being created. We just need to make the same amount of things but green. And it's actually in complete contradiction with a planet that has like finite boundaries. Like we don't have enough resources to continue this way. But then we're made to believe that we need that new thing, and we need that, and that's what will bring you happiness, rather than connection to our neighbours or to our community instead. It's
so true, and I think there's lack of that. There's especially now, even more so. Like, I mean, you're 27.
Yes, yeah.
I'm 31.
Good research.
I'm 31, and I was of the era where we would play out and like go knocking on people's doors. We didn't have phones.
No, me too.
Yeah, and it was cool. But like my younger sister, who's 18, completely different. Doesn't ever go out really ever. Like they just sit on their phones, and I just feel like there's a loss of connection and this disillusionment with younger people, I think, and it's hard to engage them to want to fight against something.
And that makes me really sad because...
Really sad, because I was always having an opinion.
Yeah, no, I think I always... so I've written a kid's book called Climate is Just the Start.
Which is important, because I think those an introduction at a young age is so important. You don't need to see someone's like damsel in distress that's married, like finds a rich man again. Do you know what I mean? Or like finds a husband.
But I think when I was a kid, I was like asking so many questions of like, why this, why that? Like, why is the world this way? You know, when I'd see, I don't know, people suffering further away from me, I'd ask like, why is that happening? And wouldn't just accept that that's just the way the world is, or like things have to be this way. But I do worry a bit how much kids are even like not being able to learn how to think anymore because of AI as well. This is something I worry about quite a lot, is how I was talking to some people who are teenagers, and for their assignments at school, all of it's online now. And also one of my friends who's a teaching assistant, all of it's online now. All a lot of kids are doing is like putting in all the questions into ChatGPT and having ChatGPT answer all of them, which means that you're like, or even if ChatGPT gives them like a structure of how to write an essay or something, you're losing that like first step of critical thinking of learning how to, or even just trying to think about, what is this question? How would I frame it? What do I think about it? Instead, you're asking this AI to think about it instead. And it just does worry me, because then how are we going to really be able to like practically make solutions to the climate crisis if we are not learning how to think anymore? And
do you think that's what they want though?
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes a lot of sense if people
it does.
are not
Now you've said it, I'm like,
things. Yeah, no, but it's worrying, because also, if we believe that our community is just our phone and not our neighbours around us, we're also going to start caring a lot less about what happens to our neighbours next to us, if we don't even know who they are. Whereas I remember when I was younger, at least, I would be running around with the neighbourhood kids. We'd be going in the woods. I grew up in the countryside, so we'd like make mud pies and catch toads and things.
Yeah,
and
same.
I feel like people aren't doing that as much anymore, and that disconnection with nature, I already think with our generation, like, was already quite bad, and it's getting kind of worse, is that we're getting more and more alienated from the natural world and each other.
It's really sad, actually, and I think like about the critical thinking side and the AI, like obviously we see it, people are like, it's a convenience, it just makes things a bit easier, but actually as a kid your brain is at its like peak of like learning and being able to being able to kind of do that. And I think, had I not had my head in a book when I was like 8 years old, like what would I be like now, you know? Listen to music, like I love like all of that. I think now we're just sitting on TikTok, people are just sitting on TikTok and then they're just hearing opinions or like, I don't know, it's quite scary.
And we're also just, I mean, I don't know the exact amount, but many decades ago, the amount that we'd read in a day would be so much less than we do now, or even just information that we consume, because it would just be from, you know, books and from newspapers and things. Now every day, because of social media, we are reading almost like probably as much as we'd read in a month in a day, because of scrolling through Instagram, which means it makes sense why then kids would not have the energy to read, because you've already been reading so much. And so I think that there's a thing that sometimes I think the old generation can be like, oh, kids don't have attention spans anymore, they don't care, it like they just want to watch TikTok. And I'm just like, these algorithms have also been created to be really addictive.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder like who benefits from a generation of people who don't have an attention span and who find critical thinking really difficult. Like, how are we going to really like understand like why the billionaire class is a problem if we like aren't even getting those first steps of learning to like challenge things and learning to understand them properly?
I mean, it's really scary. And even like there was a recent statistic, I don't know if you saw, with Gen Z, like 52% wanted them to be, would rather the UK be under a dictatorship, and it's that's mad.
That is really, really deeply worrying.
Yeah, really worrying, because I think a lot of them firstly don't know what that means.
Yeah, exactly.
And secondly, it shows it lacks a drive or something, like it lacks wanting to do something for yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
To have a dictator just telling you what to do, like it's quite scary.
That is really scary. Because I think when I was a kid, I would have been like the complete opposite. I would have been like, obviously not. Because I think also my parents also very much put in a lot of effort, because I was born in Jamaica but then raised in the UK. They didn't want me to like disconnect from my Jamaican roots, and so they kind of enforced me to watch these documentaries about Jamaican history or read these books about people like Annie of the Maroons, who were freedom fighters. And I was really like instilled in me that the freedoms that we have today are things that were fought and won by people against, huge oppression and against like really difficult odds. And so in the same way, the world that we have today, not to just maintain it, but to create one that's better, we have to also challenge things and we have to fight. But if young people are not feeling that way, that does really worry me. Yeah,
I think we are fed this idea that we have these liberties and we're free, but actually I don't think we are free. I think what they're kind of creating is this insidious way to control everyone through media and through social media and all different forms. And I think it's scarier because of the lack of free thinking. Whereas back then, I think radical thinking or thinking, just thinking for yourself was normal or was what people would do. It worries me now what creativity will be like.
I think there are two sides to it in the sense that I think in some way social media has like democratized information in some senses because, for example, this is all just me, but from when I used to write articles about climate issues when I was still at university, if I would pitch articles about climate and race to the places that I wrote for, they would always get rejected over and over. And then I realized that I can just write about those things myself on Instagram and on my own platform. And that gave me like autonomy to talk about things. And in a similar way, like if you would I became like really obsessed with reading the news all the time when I took a social media break, which I think I was just replacing social media with the news. But it really showed me how if you only looked at like BBC News and The Guardian, and you didn't look at maybe like Al Jazeera or others, you would, about around Palestine in particular, you would think that it's just that, Palestinians in Gaza are like terrible or they're not really people, and Israel's just like trying to like care for itself, and it's this like, almost like this like feminine state that needs to be protected. Was kind of a lot of the language that we used around it.
Yeah, it was definitely like the language was definitely like repressed kind of language or language that was like diluted, sorry.
Yeah, for sure. Whereas on social media, people are able to share about, like Palestinians in particular are able to share about their reality. So there are like definite like benefits in some way to like the democratization in some way of like media through social media. But I also think we can't get too relaxed into it because even in that, it's staying within certain echo chambers and bubbles that are reaffirming each other themselves more. That I think about how sometimes I think, there's no point talking about this thing because everyone knows already. And then I like hang out with a friend who's not in the same circles that I'm in. And I'm just talking about something casually and they're like, I had no idea about that. And that makes me realize how much we are in these echo chambers, these bubbles, and therefore we need to still try and speak out of them. But then the algorithms themselves exist to try and keep you in that bubble and to share your content with people who either think the same as you or who like really hate you because what they want is engagement and people staying on the page. So I think it's a complicated thing. If it falls into the wrong
side, it's bad.
No, for sure. And I think it's just a difficult thing. And the reason that I chose to write Climate Just the Start for 8 to 12-year-olds is because I go into schools and talk about climate things to young people. And I noticed that when I go to secondary schools, the kids are a bit more like, I don't know if it's like a puberty thing. I don't know what it is. But I remember this at school as well, is that almost it becomes not cool to care about things. And you're like, I'm going to, maybe it's just because secondary school can be intense. But you're almost just trying to be like, I'm trying to survive this world, this new ecosystem. And so I'm not going to be moved by things. I'm not going to care about them as much because it's just not cool to. And I'm just
it's more important to just what's happening to you in that moment, right?
Exactly. Whereas I find that when I go to primary schools, kids are way more like engaged. Like and they're willing to cry. Or sometimes I'll do things where I ask them like, what is the thing you care about most? And they're like, my mum and my cat. And I love that. And and they're willing to say that in front of the whole class. And they'll be like, they're willing to ask questions and they don't care about seeming like stupid because they realize that learning is important and that they don't know everything. Whereas I feel like there's a kind of change that happens when we get a bit older where we feel a bit like we need to be harder. Yeah. And we also can't be vulnerable and we can't not know things. And I think we need to hold on to that feeling of like.
So that's this book for the 8 to 12-year-olds?
Yes, yeah.
Look at the cover, it's gorgeous.
That's me.
I love how colourful it is though. I love the fact that it's like, bright and it's attention grabbing, but then obviously you're talking about something that's so important. I think that's kind of like you said, the Trojan horse.
Yeah, I think that was something that we wanted to do. Also,
and this one, it's not that radical. So the neon.
That's the adult book.
That's the adult one.
So I love that with Climate Just that there's a picture of a young woman wearing an afro in bright pink, on the cover of a book. And I had no books like that when I was a kid. So that feels really exciting.
So how does that feel? Yeah, how does that feel for you to like be able to do that?
It feels really surreal. It feels really, really surreal because I was bullied really badly as a kid and it meant that books became my best pals. And I would just basically spend all summer just reading. And a lot of the books that I read, just because of the nature of, I guess, who was recommending books to me were like about white kids and white people. And that was kind of the worldview with which I was like escaping into. And I didn't realize until I was much older how even like that escape wasn't really like a comfortable place for me. And so it feels, when I was writing Climate Just the Start, I was really like trying to think about what would I as a kid have, what would I wish that I could have known, and what would have really helped me, because a lot of the things that I have written about are things that took me until being an adult to understand, like capitalism. I didn't understand that fully until I was at university, and like if I'd understood that like as an 8-year-old, that would have really changed my life.
Totally,
or as a 10-year-old. So it feels really surreal, and also it does actually feel like this is worth doing, because I went through a while. I'm not sure if you can like resonate with this in some way, but of wondering like, what's the point of writing a book? Because there's so much stuff going on in this world. Things feel really urgent, and sometimes spending, as you know, hours and hours and hours writing feels like, is this the best use of my time?
Yeah.
And I love writing. It's something that like I've always done, but
I think you're going to write more, like write way more.
Oh no, now I know I will, because I also reminded myself of how many books changed my life completely. Like especially reading like Audre Lorde or like Assata Shakur's like autobiography. These books really like changed my life and my worldview. And I think also reading a book, it's such a unique experience. You spend maybe tens of hours with one other person, basically, like the writer. And that I do think has a really big impact on you as a person. If you think about, you know, that thing people say of like, you know, you become a reflection of like the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yep.
When I was a kid, the 5 people I spent the most time with were authors a lot of the time. And many of them I'm actually glad that I became a reflection of, like Audre Lorde. I'm glad that I hope that in some way I became a reflection of her. And so the books that you're reading, you're spending so much time with them. Sometimes you're spending more time with them than you do with people around you. And so I think it can have a really big impact on who you are. So I think it's worth doing.
Totally, it can define your identity. And I think, like you said, you didn't see anyone like you on the books. Now little kids are going to see themselves through you, and like you're going to be their voice. And I think it's so powerful, and we need that. We need those voices in the world, because otherwise it's like we were saying, free thinking and critical thinking isn't going to be a thing.
I think imagination is one of the most important things, and especially with the climate crisis, but also like any social crisis we've had, imagination has been essential, because we have to be able to imagine a new world. And also we have to recognize that the world that we live in today, we're walking around in the imagination of basically a few old white dudes from a long time ago. And just because they like kind of legitimize their imagination by putting fancy words around it doesn't make it more legitimate than our imaginations of what a world could be or what the world should look like. And so if their imaginations were powerful enough to create all this, like ours can be so powerful too. And so I think, practicing that imagination is something that I really try and encourage. And I think kids have that so much as well.
It's so true. And I think it's so hard, though, to be that voice. And I can imagine you have felt this when so much of the media has such a bias towards a lot of conversations that don't benefit those people at the top. Things that like will benefit the people, it's not what they want. And also culture wars. They want to create culture wars amongst demographics. And that's what's so important. Like I think it's so important when you talk about intersectionality amongst it, because there's so much of that around not just climate, but like with race and class, and the way that the media tries to divide every single group of us. They don't want us to be together, because if we are all together as one, then we'll be like, actually, fuck this is shit. What's happening here? Let's change this. But actually, if we hate our neighbour, like what you were saying, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think of that illustration of, I think that the man in it, the old white man, is meant to represent Rupert Murdoch, and he basically has like a pile of cookies, and across from him
I've seen that.
is like 2 people. One of them is like meant to represent, I think, a working class white person, and one of them is meant to represent like an immigrant. And the immigrant worker's plate is empty. And the white working class worker has like a couple cookies, and the Rupert Murdoch character has like a big pile, and he's saying like, oh, watch out, mate, that immigrant's going to steal your cookie, when really he has all of them. And I think that's like what the media often wants us to do, but also what like the elite class want us to do, is make us fight, us as like minoritized people, us as oppressed people, to fight each other, rather than to actually look at them and say like, actually, like the billionaire class is the problem. Like actually those who are hoarding huge amounts of wealth, like wealth that's like hard for us to even conceive, like they are the ones who are the problem, not like someone who has like had to flee conflict and is wanting to get a better life, and who actually is not going to impact you at all.
There's the levels. There's kind of like celebrity, which is the glitz and the glam, and they have a lot of the people of like A-list or whatever. They have money.
Yeah,
it's a lot of money, but it's not billions. But then there's the billionaires above that aren't really like at front of everything. Yeah. So celebrity keeps everyone like engaged and like, oh, that's really, look at that pretty dress. And like it's we grew up with like reading gossip.
I think it's really like deliberate. Like it's
totally
like the celebrity class are basically almost like an armor for the billionaire class who we don't know about. Like
absolutely
the ones that the ones who have huge amounts of money that we don't know about. They're like, focus on these people. They'll like entertain you. It's kind of that quote that says like, give them bread and circuses and they won't revolt.
Yeah.
Like if you give us all enough entertainment, if we have enough like funny TikToks and things, or like enough things about who's wearing that and that's that, then we won't really like interrogate the conditions of our life that are being held up by an elite class who benefit from like the majority of people not having enough to live.
But
like in this country,
so much money.
They have so much money, and and it doesn't come from nowhere. And I think sometimes there's this idea that they have so much money because they're smart and they're, you know, better than other people. Actually, it's because they're more ruthless than other people.
There's no such thing as an ethical billionaire.
No, it's not. It's literally not possible to to have that much wealth.
Yep.
Because even say that, I can't remember the name of the creator, but I saw someone make a video about this where they're saying like, even say that someone has happened to make their money ethically. Like they have made, their example they used was that they've made an ebook and they have sold it online, which I still think there's like ethical commerce on there. But say they just sell it directly, there's no workers being involved in this scenario, and they make $1 billion from that. And say even they then redistribute like up to 100 million of that, so that's huge amounts of money still. They're still deciding where that money then goes. And so therefore exerting like a huge amount of unelected power, which is what billionaires, we've seen that with Musk. Like he has basically, through his wealth that he has made through exploiting other people and also through having generational wealth as well, he now is able to exert huge amounts of power, not just in the US, but like across Europe. He's supporting the far-right party in Germany, who recently made huge gains. Like he's trying to...
And the UK.
In the UK as well. And that's unelected power that these people are having. And it's something that I've like worried about for a while. And I think sometimes, and it's not even just the kind of super villainy ones like, you know, Musk and Bezos that we know about. There are also going to be many billionaires that aren't in the public eye. But even the good ones, like say the Bill Gates billionaire who, you know, redistributes huge amounts of his money. We have to then like ask, where is that money going? Who's deciding where that money goes? And what worldview and what future is that upholding? I don't know how many years ago it was now, but a few years ago, Bill Gates actually invited me to speak at one of his events.
Oh,
and
wow.
It was a bizarre invitation to receive because I was thinking, did they do their research? Yeah. do they know what I think about billionaires? And I talked to a lot of different friends beforehand, and I was like, what should I do? Should I go and say something, or is by going there, am I upholding that as like a place? And they said that it was worthwhile me going if I do an intervention. And so they flew me to New York, and I was on a panel for this event, and we did a rehearsal. And in the rehearsal, I just said very different things than I was going to say the next day. I just said lots of very like, climate justice is important, like, you know, kind of what they want young people often to say. But then on the day, I said that at this event where before us, there'd been 3 hours of Bill Gates talking about why he's amazing, basically, and why his foundation are amazing. And we had to watch him make a salad for like half an hour, which was odd.
Rich people are weird.
Yeah, very odd. Then I just pointed out like the kind of elephant in the room of the fact that like billionaires should not exist, and that capitalism is the problem, and that philanthro-capitalism, this like philanthropist capitalism, is basically just still exerting power over what future we have in the future. Like a lot of these billionaires, all that I've seen that have maintained their billionaire status in particular, like they're not going to fund projects that make it not possible for them to continue to be billionaires. Mm-hmm. And so they're continuing a world where billionaires still exist. And so, for billionaires to exist, there's a huge amount of extraction from people and harms. And so I think it's really, in that it was important just to challenge even the like so-called good billionaires, because even within that, if you really care about the climate crisis, then give all your money to like indigenous groups in the US who have saved the most amount of oil production from being happening, and they've actually created the most climate solutions. Like actually give away the power, not just the money.
I think it's so important to have voices that do question authority the way it is and just call it out for the bullshit. You know?
Yeah, no, but I've also noticed this in my journey as someone who has like gained a platform from doing this work. There are like oftentimes like so many occasions where I feel like institutions are trying to like absorb me within them so that I won't challenge things as much, almost that like, oh, like join this committee or like, or do this ad or do this thing where for something that I obviously don't agree with, but like, oh, you know, we'll give you loads of money. And to try and like, I think soften a lot of the like challenges or things. I even think that in some way, maybe like being at that Gates event, it's like, oh, some other people would have said, oh, you know, by being there, you get access to power. Like this is a fund that has huge amounts of money. I work with so many different grassroots groups that would benefit from donations and from that kind of those funds. But that's how I think we end up not challenging things sometimes. And I think I'm lucky that I could go into that space and say those things, whereas a lot of everyone else in the room, if they're like projects that they're working on that are actually saving people's lives in the moment, if they would be compromised by challenging those things, they can't say them. So often I have tried to maintain like a sort of distance from things so that I can continue to challenge things and not compromise other people.
But you like, it takes real nerve and like guts to do it. And and I think it's so important to question if you become part of, say, like a community or a group and you're fighting for something or you're being brought into a conversation, you can still challenge that, because you can't, if we all just agree and then because I agree with what you're saying, like getting taken into certain institutions or certain places, it makes you feel like, oh, I can't really say anything, I don't want to bite the hand.
Yeah, the
kind
fees,
of vibe.
Yeah.
So it's I definitely know what that feels like, and I think I wouldn't be able to stay authentic to me if I didn't voice that opinion or just like, you know. So I think it's important to keep doing that. Otherwise, we'll all be sat with Piers Morgan.
Please God no. Also, when I was on Laura Kay with Piers Morgan, they only told me the day before as well. This is one thing that
that's
also
what I mean.
Yeah,
they don't want you to be prepared.
No, they don't. Although they didn't realise I was very prepared for whatever came for me. But even with when I was on Newsnight and it was Kwasi Kwarteng, I also only found out like the day before, and it's the producers obviously doing their job, because other than the beef that the majority of people have with Piers, I didn't have like particular beef with him. But Kwasi Kwarteng was the minister of the government, the department of the government that I took to court, and so it felt like they did, and I was quite grateful to have that opportunity. But I
mean, amazing to
be able to challenge someone in person. But even in that, I think I have to remember when I'm doing any of these things that these institutions don't care about me. Like they don't care about my well-being. We can like use the spaces that we are like able to access to challenge things when we can, but we also have to remember, I've had to remember that I have to also look after myself. My friend and mentor, Yara Rodriguez Fowler, who is like an incredible organizer and like author, she's just amazing, and I organize with her in Fossil Free Books, and we were talking the other day and having a little mentorship session, and she was saying how both of us, like our ratio of like courage to sensitivity is like not the right ratio to often be able to do these things, because both of us like we are like really willing to put ourselves out there and challenge things, but also we are like very sensitive people and find these spaces quite difficult. And I've really struggled in the last year in particular, like with my mental health around these things, because I put a lot of pressure on myself, and there is also a lot of pressure that comes when you put yourself in the public eye, and everyone's going to have an opinion about what you are doing or what you're saying, and some of them you can dismiss because they're just obviously are not going to agree with you. But sometimes it can really like grate you over time. I think I thought I was a bit tougher than I am, maybe. And then
no human's meant to experience that.
No, you're not
meant to see that. You know, like we're not meant to have access to phones in our pockets and allow anyone to say whatever they want, you know? Like it's just not normal. So I feel like you've got the courage to do it, but in my experience too, I have to just ignore it. Like I can't even engage with it, because in the past I have engaged, and that just gives them what they want, and then it feeds that like the negativity. And it's like, I'm trying to speak about what I feel, you're standing up for what you believe is right, and that's more than what you're doing sat behind a keyboard.
Yeah, and I think what I've had to also do is be like, I trust the people I organize within groups, I trust the people who are around me, and I trust that they will call me in, or that they will like challenge me, or they'll be honest with me when I need them to be honest with me. And so I've had to just like kind of rely on that, but also to make sure that I remain in spaces and surrounded by people who will challenge me, because I'm always like really worried about getting to that point where I kind of strayed far away from what I maybe believe in now. And the online, it's so hard. I find it really, really difficult to sometimes discern the difference between someone just being like mean and someone giving you a valid critique. And it's really difficult when you get so much like shit thrown at you. It can get really hard to discern that difference. So I have like a huge amount of empathy for people with big platforms who I can really understand why they will just be like, I don't understand what I'm meant to do here, or whether people are just being mean to me, or whether they're just whether they're actually validly challenging me. So I think I've tried to just make sure that I'm surrounded by people who I respect them, I trust them, I know they'll tell me, and so I can listen to them, and I don't have to like read every single thing that's being said about me on Twitter after a news appearance or something, because if I did that I'd lose my mind.
Absolutely not. No one should ever have to do that. And I think especially whenever I've spoken up about trans issues or trans rights, that always gets a conversation going or a backlash going. I remember like recently I did something with TFL and they renamed all of the overgrounds, which I do think is a bit annoying for everyone, but they've all got lovely names now. And I was part of the Mildmay line, which is in Dalston, and it was the old like doctors' hospital that would treat HIV patients back in like the 80s, and it's where Princess Diana went, and it was like a lot of history and queer history. And the amount of conversation, like things on Twitter being like, I'm not going to sit on that seat now. It's like, great, right.
Gosh,
And they'd be like, just horrible stuff. And I'm like, there is a real cesspit on social media that I think the Musks and the Trumps encourage. Like Trump, I mean, Musk obviously owns X. X, whatever. And going back to what we were saying earlier, because I could talk to you for hours. The worrying thing for everyone is the fact that Elon Musk is getting involved in politics. Someone who is so rich, the wealthiest man in the world, is getting involved in American, European, British politics. Like, what does that tell you is happening? Like, is it an ego thing? Is he just putting it all out on the table and making us like realize that he's a twat? Maybe I can't say that. But like, what is he doing? That's what we've got to worry about. Trump's already a billionaire. There shouldn't be. I don't think we should have billionaires running countries.
No, but also at the same time, billionaires have been running countries for a long time, but we just haven't known. Like, it's been kind of undercover. I think the difference with Musk is that he's like so brazen about it, and also paired with Trump, he's being given like even more access. Because I mean, already, even in the UK, like big donors to both, well, to not both, but like all however many political parties there are, especially like Labour, the Tories, and Reform, there are big lobbying groups that basically pay for time with politicians and time in Parliament. Like this is something that has existed for a long time, kind of undercover, so that, for example, fossil fuel legislation is not passed. But I think what is really worrying with Musk and with Trump is that there's almost like this legitimization of it, of like, oh, that's actually fine. Like before, I think it's been very undercover because there would be some like level of outrage if people knew about it. I do worry about how we are like normalizing authoritarianism with Trump and Musk.
Scary.
Yeah. And I saw that Grace Blakely was also talking about how this pairs with the fossil fuel industry and these tech companies, because beforehand, you know, Google, they were very like pro, at least publicly, they'd say that they were, you know, caring about the climate crisis and, you know, pro DEI stuff, et cetera. And then with Trump coming into power, and even just before, there's been this big switch of them being like very anti these things. I mean, already they were providing like AI technology to the Israel Defense Force, so they were never doing great things.
That's worrying as well. The power of AI. If it gets in the wrong hands, then it's a thing that needs to be controlled or regulated.
But it's the thing, because AI requires so much energy. That's Grace was saying that's why these big tech companies are no longer wanting to be climate companies, because they need huge amounts of fossil fuels to power these big AI and huge amounts of water and resources. And so it is worrying how when it comes to like kind of climate legislation in particular, we're almost like going back, and we really need to be like pushing forward really quickly.
That must be really, what's the right word? without being angry.
You can be angry. Anger is actually a really good thing. I think
it's
like
good
we need
emotion.
and we can't. If you push it down, it rots within us. And then we despair and we feel like everything's collapsing.
I drink too much.
It's actually really good. It's a good motivator, I think, as well.
I think I guess it's like understanding that anger is a valid emotion. I think growing up as a queer kid, I felt anger towards me from people, and I kind of did build it up because I wasn't an angry person. I wasn't going to fight back. So I think I've never really understood how to express anger without getting emotional.
I don't really know either. I don't have. I talk about this in therapy a lot.
Yeah, same.
I find anger is difficult to navigate around because there's so much that we should be angry about and that we are angry about, but like how, especially like as a Black woman, I found that I've always been perceived as angry, even if I don't feel like I am. So I've pushed that anger down even more.
Yeah.
But it comes out in different ways in my life that I wouldn't want it to. And I feel often sometimes like my depression is almost like my anger not being able to express itself and coming out as anxiety or depression and different things as well. And so I think it's important we find a way to channel it. But studies have shown that anger is a really good motivator for people to do things. So finding
protesting and everything, that's a lot of like
shouting,
anger, but like it's justice. It's like for freedom. It's like liberation. There's like such an energy to it. I think anger is totally valid. We all need to be angry, but like it must be really irritating to see the pendulum go back.
There's two kind of prongs to it. With the US election in particular, everyone was given like two terrible options. Like obviously one was significantly worse, for people, especially presently today, but also like the Democrats were like, Joe Biden had approved more oil fields than Trump had in his presidency. Like that's, but then had presented himself as this like big climate leader, and also had like given so much money to Israel to bomb Gaza and to like continue the annexation of things like the attempted annexation of the West Bank, which we're kind of seeing right now. So I think this idea that like things have only just got bad isn't true, but what I do worry about is kind of this changing of what is seen as acceptable. And
the fact that we're even having conversations about what salute was.
Yes, exactly.
10 years ago, that would not even be a conversation. Like that would not be a thing.
No, at all. And
we spent a week of discourse conversations online, thinking, no, it wasn't. Was it? When actually we should be like, this should not be happening.
Exactly. And I think. But one thing that I kind of hoped would come out of a Trump presidency is that people would see that obviously this is awful. Therefore, what we need to do is support each other. We need to build mutual aid. We need to build like our own resistance. And people would realize that we can't rely on US imperialist government to save all of us, whether it is Democrat or Republican, and that we need to actually like really be kind of radicalized in that way of like pushing ourselves to believe for what we actually need rather than accepting kind of these not real solutions I think we're being offered before. I think what worries me is that I think rather than that happening for like completely valid reasons, people are just scared and people are like demoralized because also this isn't the first time this is the second time there's been a Trump presidency. Also this time he's way more organized than he was before. He knows what he's doing. And I think, I can understand people are just really scared. And I think in the face of that, we do just need to think about how do we, those people who maybe have already been doing some organizing and activism for a long time, like how can we try and build frameworks and try and build like kind of what I see as like mycelial networks of like under the ground of mutual aid or of, anti-raids groups for resisting immigration or community energy projects, things like that, so that we can kind of grow our own mushrooms of like revolutionary change to be possible without having to rely on the state for that. There's a quote by Valerie Kaur that I try and remind myself of in times like this, which I think Lighthouse Bookshop, which is my favourite bookshop in Edinburgh, they're amazing. I think that they sent it to me at the last election of Trump, where she says like, what if this is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? And I try and think about that of like, Marx also talks a lot about how before kind of the revolutionary change happens, there is like an era of darkness and of authoritarianism and of fascism. And so I hope that we will see like, and be able to see this instruction as that what we're doing so far and this politics of changing small things is not enough. And we actually need to give our full selves. There are more of the people who are being oppressed than there are of the people doing the oppressing.
Absolutely.
And so if we come together, we can actually transform things and we can actually challenge things. And I really believe that we will be able to do that.
I hope so, and I think it massively starts with the media and the way that the rhetoric they put out, the conversations, the way they use language, like
And storytelling.
and storytelling. We need to stop the division because that's keeping everyone away from this happening. And when the darkness is happening, everything does feel like it's heavier. Everyone's skin, like everyone's going through a lot of difficult things. I think it's really hard to want to fight and stand up against something. That's what they want. Is compassion fatigue. Like don't, when everyone's knackered, everyone's just worried about themselves because that's what they've made the culture to be like. And I think in history, like what you said there, it's so true. There has been things created from darkness and arts come out and people express themselves. And it's a shame that it takes something of real darkness to get that. We should all want to live like that as much as we can, you know. But
and I just really look at movements that came before and try and learn from them, because we're given this quite like sanitized version of history as if changes happened because the people in power gained consciences and like morally changed their opinions, when in reality, like the reason that changes happened were because the majority of people came together and pushed them through and organized for these changes to be possible. So if I look at, for example, I'm Jamaican, my ancestors were enslaved, and often, what I was taught in the UK schooling system was that slavery was abolished from Britain because, you know, we were really moral and like, you know, peace, love, like we were just good people. And some people wrote letters and that changed people's minds. And it was a letter writing campaign that ended slavery is basically what we're told. What we're not told is about like all of the like slave riots that happened where enslaved people's captives, as I try and like frame it instead to kind of put the onus more on people who captured people. They like, enslaved people's captives revolted. They damaged property so that slavery wasn't as profitable anymore. Also, there were like boycott campaigns of sugar. People didn't buy sugar so that the sugar industry couldn't continue. And it was these slave revolts in Jamaica, in Haiti, and other places that meant that slavery wasn't as profitable anymore. And that's what ended it. It wasn't just this like moral campaign. And I think if we recognize that that's how change has happened in those ways, then we can see that transformational change isn't impossible, because before any transformational change has ever happened, it's always been viewed as impossible, just before, by the majority of people. And then as soon as it happens, everyone's like, well, that was definitely going to happen. I knew that was going to change. And so I think we need to realize that if all of these things seemed impossible then, what seems impossible to us now is possible, and a better world is so possible, but only if we choose to kind of learn from how that change happened before. And also know that there's so much you can gain from it. Like knowing your community is really fulfilling as well, and working together. And really seeing you can change things, I think also kind of moves you away from that compassion fatigue as well.
Michaela Loach, if there's one thing that you want in 10 years' time to happen, or the future, what do you want it to be?
The fall of capitalism.
The fall of capitalism.
I think it's already happening, but if that was the one thing, I think it would change a lot of things.
Fall of capitalism. And also back to the point of growing your own mushrooms, legalise psilocybin.
Yes. I have a mushroom tattoo on my arm.
Do you?
Yeah.
I love it. Honestly, if everyone was to get on the mushrooms, just say
it might change some things.
It would. Open your mind. Your mind. Thank you so much for coming on The Pieces.
Thank you for having me.
I loved that.
Oh no, I loved it so much. Thank you. Seriously, I'm a huge fan, so this has been an honour.
And I love everything you do, so keep doing it, and I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.